Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming to such a late meeting today. But had it not been for Chairman Brian, we still wouldn't be holding it at this time. He was gracious enough to give up his spot at this allotted time so that we could meet here today. But again, thank you all for coming. We only have one bill that we're going to take up today, and that's Senate Bill 2353, which is the state penitentiary at Parchman. The phase down operation over a 4-year period, where we do have a committee sub. And before we get into the bill itself, I would just like to read an opening statement as to how and why I got to this point with this piece of legislation. And today we're gathered here for one solemn yet resolute purpose, and that's to discuss the phase out of Parchman Prison. And as we engage in this dialogue, we acknowledge the weight of history and the importance of justice in our society. Parchman Prison, a name that resonates with both the notoriety and despair, has stood for decades as a symbol of systematic failures within our criminal justice system. It has been a place marked by stories of violence, overcrowding, inhumane conditions, and for too long it has represented a stain in our collective conscience. A place where rehabilitation took a backseat to punishment and where individuals were stripped of their dignity and humanity. And as we meet here today, we must confront this with reality with courage and conviction. We cannot turn a blind eye to the injustices that have plagued Parchman for far too long. We must acknowledge the lives that have been lost and the soul that have been broken within those walls. The discussion to phase out Parchman is not one that we make lightly, but it is one that is necessary for the advancement of justice and protection of human rights. We cannot continue to allow a facility to operate under conditions that are anti-ethical to the principles of fairness and compassion. And in December of 2019 until January 2020, the prison at Parchman was the #1 and most watched news story across the country with the deaths and the riots that occurred. The state of Mississippi and her taxpayers should not continue to pour good money into a system that continues to deteriorate year after year. Mississippi should be ready to implement a plan to move past this point and not be forced by the Department of Justice like our neighboring state of Alabama with the $1 billion bill to the taxpayers. And just on last evening, while listening to the governor's State of the State speech, he again mentioned letting taxpayers keep more of their monies in their pockets. I can't imagine how this is possible if we continue to again and again pour taxpayer dollars into a 123-year-old facility where we have seen a decline in the overall population, but an increase in the cost. My question is, how and why should we continue in this practice? However, let us not recognize that the phase out of Parchman is not simply a shutting down of a building. It's about fundamentally reimagining our approach to incarceration and rehabilitation. It is about investing in communities, addressing root causes of crime, and creating pathways to redemption for those who have made mistakes. The phase out of Parchman is not the end of the conversation. It is the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter in which we prioritize rehabilitation over punishment, compassion over cruelty, and hope over despair. It is a chapter in which we strive to build a more just and ethical society for all. And in closing, I urge all of us here today, and each one of us, to join us in this vital undertaking. Let us work together to phase out Parchman Prison and to build a future where justice is truly blind, where compassion is paramount, and where every individual has the opportunity to rebuild their lives and contribute positively to society. And I read that because I just wanted you all to know, especially the members of this committee, that This bill is not anything that was just thought of during this legislative session. Again, in 2020, during the start of that session, Lieutenant Governor Hoseman had chosen me to be the chair of corrections. Neither one of us at the time was really ready for what was about to unfold in the state of Mississippi. And for weeks and months, all that we could see was the conditions at Parchman, the violence at Parchman, killings at Parchman. And it was during that time that I decided that we need to do something to fix this problem. And I started thinking about how can Mississippi move past this? How can we not make the news in regards to our deteriorating facilities that we do have at Parchman? And I myself, like the Lieutenant Governor and many other legislators, made numerous trips to Parchman to see and to witness the conditions at Parchman, not necessarily always the condition of those who was incarcerated there, but the physical conditions of the facility located at Parchman. And it was during those times that we had lawmakers, state leaders, and those who are outside the state of Mississippi who all said at one time or another, we need to close this place. And I didn't take that lightly. So my mission is that we move past this. We let our taxpayers know in Mississippi that, yes, we do want you to carry more of your monies home. And yes, we want to be good stewards of your money. And that's why we have this bill in front of us today for a 4-year phase-out period at the facility known as Parchman. And I know that there has been some concern from those who represent the areas in the Delta where Parchman is located. What do we do about jobs? How do we make sure that those individuals don't lose their jobs? Well, that was one of the first things that I thought about. How do we make sure that those people whose livelihood are at Parchman, those people that work there? And I started the conversation with the lieutenant governors and others as to how we can fix this problem. And so we started the conversation with the private there that's with the anticipation of maybe securing that facility to be named a new state penitentiary in the Delta. Therefore, we would lose no state jobs. All the operations at Parchman, a part of the operation at Parchman will move to this facility. So the jobs will be protected. Because I don't want to have a bill out there that will take away not one single job from those people in the Delta. And if this bill makes it past committee and moves on to appropriations, and we are able to make this happen, then there will not be not one net lost job for those people in the Delta. Not one net lost job for those individuals in the Delta. But more importantly, my question to the committee is, how long do we try and prop up a 123-year-old facility? How many more state dollars are we willing to invest in something that we won't ever fix in our lifetime? How long will we watch this place not be fully staffed because people are afraid to go and work there because of security measures and those types of things? We have to think about the people that work there. I know a lot of times we think about those who are incarcerated and if they are treated fairly, if they are treated, but we have to think about those people who leave their homes every day, leave their families there to go and work in these places. We should expect them to come home safely, just like they left going to work that morning. And also, in this bill, you'll notice that before you, included in the bill, is several pieces of information that was provided to us by peer at the request to number one, let us know if we are headed in the right direction. And all the information came back from peer pointed to the fact that, yes, we need to do something about the facility known as Parchman Prison in Mississippi. And I do have Mr. Ted Booth here and his associate that have come and will address any questions that the committee may have in regards to what we have here in front of us today. And if you look on one of the peer reports, the one that's dated January the 23rd, and if you look on page 2, down towards the bottom, there's 3 bullets that are highlighted on that page. And those 3 bullets are per inmate cost avoidance, operational needs, the ability to adequately provide services undermined by the location. All 3 of those things are reasons why we should be ready to move on past where we are with the phase out of Parchman. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a huge bill and it's a huge undertaking. But at some point, those of us who have been elected to lead this state forward should be ready to take on the task of making sure that that comes to reality here in the state of Mississippi. And I've tried to, I guess, explain as much as I could. And I'm going to ask Mr. Ted if he would to approach the podium there. And if there's any questions in regards to what you all have in front of you from the peer report, he's here to answer any of those questions. So at this time, I will open the floor for any questions by any members of the committee. If you would just, I would acknowledge you by the raising of your hand if there is any questions by any of the members of the committee. Senator Hill, you're recognized.
Typically, when we are doing something that's going to cost money, like shifting prisoners from Parchman to wherever, do we have a fiscal note that would give you a cost breakdown of how much it would cost to move them somewhere versus what it would cost to upgrade that facility?
We do not have that number right now. That's still an ongoing conversation that we're having. That's why this bill has been double referred to appropriations as well.
So the plan would be to move them to another facility?
The plan, yes, is to move them to another facility. Also, it's not everyone that is currently at Parchman will not necessarily move to the new facility. Those individuals who are on death row will stay at the Parchman facility because the other facility does not have the capability of carrying out a death sentence. The geriatric units will stay there at Parchman.
Yeah, where is the other facility and who?
I'm sorry, the other facility is currently at Tutwiler.
And who owns that facility?
It's managed now by Core Civic.
Do they own it?
I think they do.
Yeah, do you have some kind of agreement that we have not seen to purchase that facility or to?
Again, Senator.
I think it's cheaper to just pay them to house the inmates, probably.
Well, Senator, you may be correct in paying them, but again, if we pay them, then we risk the possibility, we risk the chance of keeping any of those people who are currently working at Parchman and Port. And I don't want them, not only do I not want them to lose their job, but I don't want those people to lose their state benefits or anything else that they may have because they are state employees with the state of Mississippi. And there is ongoing conversation. Senator Hill, I know you may disagree, but not too long ago in this legislative session, we was asked to vote on several bills regarding economic development in the state of Mississippi. One of those bills, maybe both of them, we voted on them without knowing who the companies were and the thing that was going to happen. But we did it because we trusted the government, we trusted the leadership that they was making the best decision here in Mississippi. And I can promise you that there's ongoing conversations about what it will cost us. And we're trying to move this again to appropriation. And this bill doesn't move past appropriation if we don't have those things in place. So this is not here today will not determine whether the bill moves to the Senate floor or not. This is just to get it to appropriations while we continue the discussions on the security of the facility. Any other questions, Senator Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for your hard work and effort in pushing this legislation. But one of the questions that I do have is, how are the conditions of the facility in Tallahatchie County?
Can you repeat that question, Senator?
How are the conditions of the facilities in Tallahatchie County? What are the conditions of the facility in Tallahatchie County?
The conditions at Tutwiler are probably 100 times better than what they are at Parchman. It has been well maintained, good records as far as the maintenance of the building, security, and those type of things. We're talking about facilities that's 20, maybe 25 years of age versus where we currently are at a facility that's 123 years old. And I think Mr. Booth can also explain to us unit by unit how many units we have at Parchman, with how many are being used and how many are not being used, and the amount of money that is costing us at that facility.
So how many inmates can the facility in Tutwiler hold?
It's my understanding that it can hold probably around 2,300 people.
Okay, and currently, how many is being here at Parchman?
I don't have that exact number in front of me today because it's a moving target, but I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Mr. Ted, I'm going to defer to you.
The late census toward the end of last year had it right around 2,400. And I believe this bill requires that at the end of the phase down period, Parchman would reduce their population by 1,700 off of that. So it sounds like the Tutwiler theory would have enough beds to take in the people you would move.
One other question, maybe another one after this, but when you talk about the administrator and staff from both facilities, how would you be able to incorporate that?
If the state gets to the position to where there can be an agreement to purchase a facility, quite naturally, those individuals who are state employees will be the first to move over. And if there is any other vacancy there, those individuals who are currently at the Tutwiler facility will be offered employment there so that we can make sure that we are fully staffed at that facility.
Okay. And then the other question is, on line starting at 54, Mississippi Department of Corrections should phase down the operation of the state penitentiary department in Sunflower and Quitman County over a 4-year period. Can you tell us what does that look like over a 4-year period?
Can I tell you what it would look like
Yeah,
over a 4-year period?
Yeah, over a 4-year period, yes, sir.
Well, the whole plan of a 4-year period was not to rush into doing this in haste, and to give the commissioner and MDOC an opportunity to follow those things that are in the bill to make sure that we transition from one place to the other place in a manner to where, like I said, we don't miss anything. We want to make sure that every step is followed when we do this. And that's why it's a 4-year deal. It could be done within 4 years. It may be done before the 4 years, but we want to allow enough time to make sure that everything is taken care of in a manner to where we don't miss anything.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kirby for a
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Obviously, I mean, I think I heard you say that the plan is to buy the Tutwiler facility. And then as we take prisoners out, and they won't all come out at first, I understand, but we've got a lot of land up there and all. Are we going to sell or lease Parchman then to help pay for this? Will it offset is what I'm saying?
I'll let Mr. Ted answer that question.
In this legislation, there is a provision that DOC is going to continue to hold this land in trust, but they can enter into lease agreements with anyone who wants to, farm the land or use it for any other commercial purposes but they hold this land in trust for the benefit of the state of Mississippi. So they would be expected to exercise, due care that a fiduciary exercises to find somebody who could, pay the lease, meet the lease obligations. But the bill, if adopted as written, would allow them to lease it for up to 40 years. However, they are going to have to get approval from the Public Procurement Review Board, which is responsible for approving Parchman lease contracts now.
Not sure how much it will offset, but we do know that the land in the Delta is considered some valuable and fertile land. And we know that, even if the sale of the land is $5,000, maybe more an acre, and if we only sold, Delta, the Parchman now sits on about 22,000 acres of land. So even if we sold, and that's not something but even if we sold 10,000 of those acres at $5,000 an acre, then we're looking at a huge monetary return back to the state in, towards the purchase of the new facility. I'm sorry, Senator Kirby, did that answer your question? Thank you. Senator Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Booth, I'm looking on page 11 on your January 23rd, 2024 peer report. And I see that one of the conclusions is closing 2 units, which are 25 and 28. And I guess my question is, if your conclusion, one of the conclusions based upon the California Legislative Analyst Office report, the peer staff suggests the legislature should give considerations to scaling back operations at MSP, closing 2 units, 25 and 28, being a first step. Is one of your conclusions phasing out the Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchman?
Mr. Booth, if you don't mind, could you speak in the mic?
What we believe is this, what the bill does is phase down operations at Parchman, and a phase down bill is consistent with what we were recommending. We suggested that certain units be eliminated. We also were concerned about security issues at Parchman that the Department of Justice raised a couple of years ago in their report. And our idea was it would be a good idea to reduce operations at Parchman, get it down to the point where they should be able to hire enough people to maintain a secure environment up there. While the bill doesn't do exactly what we're doing, it is consistent with what we recommended, and that was cutting back operations at Parchman.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. And is it your opinion that Parchman should not be closed down, but should continue to operate in a phased down state?
That's what the bill recommends, and that's consistent with what we were talking about in our memo. For example, we pointed out that a specialized facility like Death Row, unless you want to go build another one somewhere else, you probably need to keep that one up in operation.
Thank you.
Senator Fillingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I can direct the questions maybe to Mr. Booth first, if you would like, and
That's
then
fine.
if he needs to defer back to you, we can. So, Mr. Booth, how far of a distance is it from Tutwiler to Parchman?
Tutwiler was built several years ago by a correctional authority up in Tallahatchie County. I have not visited Tutwiler, so I don't know a whole lot about the facility. There was a time when it could only house people from out of state. Eventually, it began to hold some state inmates. I believe the chairman is probably more familiar with the facility at Tutwiler than I am.
Okay, I'll ask you.
Sir.
The distance between,
The distance is about
Parchman.
15 minutes.
okay. Is this the facility that used to hold like Hawaiian inmates over there? There seemed to have been some problems earlier on in that facility. Have those problems been corrected that you're aware of?
As far as I'm aware of, it has been.
Do you recall what those problems were?
I do not.
Were there not riots at the Tutwiler facility?
Senator Chassidal is not, and so I'm sure it was.
I think so. And I'm curious, what measures were taken to correct the problems at the Tutwiler facility, which seem to be similar to some of the problems that you're pointing out at the Parchman facility?
I think most of the problems there was, security measures as far as the doors and those type of things. But I think all of those things have been corrected since then.
Okay. You mentioned that early in the session, we had two MDA-related projects that we didn't have information about. We were asked to trust the governor's office. Isn't it true that we had memorandums of understanding with those companies that were already signed, were already in place before those projects were ever brought to the legislature?
True.
Now, we may not have known the names of the companies, but we did have actual binding and contractual agreements with those businesses that were planning to come to Mississippi.
Yeah.
Do we have binding MOUs or contracts with the owners of the facility at Tutwiler?
We do not, Senator, but the intent of this is that, and that's why, again, it's been double referred. If that doesn't happen, then this bill is dead. All of those things are contingent upon the fact if we can be able to do this as we continue to talks with those individuals.
Okay, so basically, those of us who are not on the Appropriations Committee, but we serve on this committee, we're being asked to not worry about the cost, to not worry about the fact that there's no MOU, there's no contractual agreement that has been written or signed by the parties. We're just supposed to trust that it's all going to work out in the sweet by and by and send it on down to appropriations and hope that they take care of all of our miscues.
No, it sounds good how you said it, but that's not how I've ever conducted any of the hearings and corrections. For those members who have served on corrections with me before, I've always been open and honest and transparent, and I will keep the members of this committee informed as these discussions continue to let you know where we are before these bills are actually taken up in committee in appropriations.
Well, I love your guts. I mean, you're one of my favorite people here, so please don't take this personally, but you're the one presenting this bill. I'm just trying to get to the meat of the coconut as to what you're presenting. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds a lot like we're wanting to go ahead and pass something this massive and major And yet we don't have any contracts. We don't even know who the people are that own it and whether they would enter into an agreement to lease the space to us, if they want to sell the place to us. I mean, it just seems really premature in certain areas. And I'm just trying to think, maybe I misunderstood part of what you were saying, but we don't have any of those agreements in place?
We don't have any of those agreements in place on paper.
Well, that's the only
but
place that they would be on paper.
I can understand where you're going with that, Senator, but I am one of those people that still believe that when gentlemen, there should still be room for gentlemen to have an agreement that we will continue to talk to this. And that's where I'm going with this. And there are some conversations that are happening. So again, this is not, the bill doesn't move past appropriations. It probably won't even move out of appropriations if we don't have this information to them in the next couple of days. Because I think you understand that the deadline for all of these things is pretty quick. So
I'm not sure it should move past here if we don't have those agreements. I mean, we're talking about state taxpayer dollars.
but we're also,
Gentlemen's agreements that are unwritten, that
But we're also-
conversations are still taking place.
but we're also talking about state taxpayer dollars that we'll continue to put into a facility that we won't ever get a return on. I mean, I don't see how we can say that it's okay to spend millions of taxpayer dollars annually on a system that's continuing to fall apart.
So let me ask this, what is the cost estimate of the 4-year phase out that we're anticipating in this particular piece of legislation currently?
I'm going to say, Senator, if everything, if all the talks and everything continue to goes like it's going, to be able to maybe purchase the facility or buy the facility, and to be able to move the inmates there, we maybe upward of maybe $100 million.
Over 4 years?
Over
Or is
4
this
years.
upfront cost?
Some of it will be upfront cost, and then some of it will be the monies over a 4-year period.
So in contrast, if you were to take that $100 million over 4 years and invest those dollars at the current facility that we already own, is it not possible to upgrade the facilities at Parchman to bring them up to speed and code?
Senator, if you could have, or I'd be glad for you to accompany me to Parchman to see what we have. And I think you would agree that we could not pour enough of taxpayer monies in it to get it to where it needs to be. Alabama did the same thing. They thought the same thing. And the question to us now is the same it was then. It's not if the Department of Justice is going to demand that we do something, it's when they're going to demand that we do something. And I just don't want to be in the position to spend millions of taxpayer dollars to continue to patch something that we won't ever fix, where I think we can take a proactive stand and fix our problem and not let the taxpayer be burdened. 5 years ago, it was a $1 billion investment. I mean, $1 billion to the state of Alabama. We're talking about things have changed since then. So we're looking at maybe $1 billion plus here in Mississippi. And trust me, Senator, I do hear your concern. And I knew that this was going to be a concern coming into the meeting, not having those things. But I'm asking you all, and again, if for those who have served on the committee with me, to know that I won't continue to move this until we get those numbers, but I would like to get it to the committee to where the money is handled while we continue these. And I'm not just doing this, but I'm asking you all to, I think there should be a level of trust amongst us here in this building. And I'm asking, and that's what I'm asking, is that you trust me in the process to do exactly what I'm saying. And I think and I'm glad that we have these meetings open like this, and I'm glad that we have these meetings where they are live streamed. So not only you, but those who are listening, looking at this meeting can see and understand what it is that I'm asking for.
So the $100 million you're talking about, the 4-year phase down, you're talking about several units, the hospital, death row, the nursing facility, those that have to stay opened at the Parchman facility. Are those all up to speed currently, those facilities that will remain open?
Most of those facilities I mean, there's still some work that has to be done, and they are usable. And the reason for this is because the other facility doesn't have the hospital there now in other places. And so, and being that it's only 10, 15 minutes apart, then that shouldn't be a problem is to getting people back and forth to the medical attention that they need and leaving the geriatric unit.
So the 100 million does or does not cover the cost of maintaining the facilities that would remain open even after 4 years at Parchman?
No,
So that would be an additional taxpayer cost.
yes.
Do you know approximately how much that cost would be?
I can't give you a cost on that, simply because I wish I could, but again, we have to take in consideration those units that are there. I can't tell you what's going to happen with the air conditioning unit from year to year. I can't tell you what may happen with other things that's necessary to keep the facility open. So I can't give you a cost on those things that changes.
Well, I'm not talking about things in the future that's unforeseen. I'm talking about as of today, right now, you're telling us that the facilities that will remain open, they're up to par. We don't need to allocate any additional state dollars to bring those up to speed.
Well, nothing is absolute. So, I mean, if every day that it stays open, yes, it costs the state of Mississippi to make sure that we do that we do maintain these facilities. So is it up to par to where it won't cost us anything? No.
All right, you had said earlier that your idea was to keep no net losses of employment in the Delta for those who are employed in the facilities.
Yes.
So how many are currently employed at the Tutwiler facility?
I don't have that number, but I do think that Mr. Booth have the number for those who are actually employed at Parchman. And he can also, Mr. Booth, that you would just step in front of the mic there.
So at the Tutwiler facility currently, how many persons are employed at that facility? Are you aware?
I do not know how many people are at Tutwiler.
Do you have an approximate ballpark figure of how many employees are there?
No, do not have a ballpark number.
So my question then, I guess, getting around to in a different way, is the proposal to keep, because I mean, you've said that all of the, Tutwiler is in the Delta as well, right?
Yeah.
15 minutes from Parchman. So if you're saying there's no net job losses to persons living in the Delta, that would mean you would have to, under your proposal, keep all of the current folks at Tutwiler employed, as well as all the people at Parchman employed. And so when you move all the people at Parchman, except the few units you're planning to keep open, over to Tutwiler, is there enough employment at Tutwiler to keep the Tutwiler employees employed as well as the Parchman employees
If we
employed?
look at the amount of vacancies that we have at Parchman, I'm sure that there's some at Tutwiler. I'm sure that with both of those, then we would probably fill all the vacancies that we have within our prison system at both facilities, or close.
So there's so many vacancies. There would have to be 50% vacancy at Parchman and 50% vacancy at Tutwiler if they're approximately the same size prisons in order for there not to be any net job losses. Is that what you're anticipating?
My anticipation is that, again, that there is no net loss of jobs. And again, Senator, I know that this is a massive bill. And is it a absolute 100%? It's probably not, but it's like every other piece of legislation, you know, we still are going to work on this to make sure that we address all of those needs that this bill continues to move along the process.
Well, my concern is that the Delta, we always hear about how severe the job shortages are in the Delta region. And these are currently 2 employers that are employing Delta populations.
But we
And
do have to understand also that some of those people who are working at the Tutwiler facility may be working there, but not really residents.
So they're
Because-
residents outside of the Delta, but still in Mississippi, or are they residents
Yeah.
from out of state?
Out of state.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Senator, for your questions. Do we have any other questions? Senator Sparks, you recognize for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Booth, couple of questions on, I guess, some of it in the report and some of it based on kind of the questions that we've received. The report talks about operating units at the state penitentiary on page 3, and you give us a pretty good breakdown of the operating units. What is, if you know, what is the maintenance cost? And I realize we can have a HVAC unit go out, but generally, what is the maintenance cost annually at Parchman? Do we know?
I do not know. Do we know? Okay. We do not know what the annual, say, HVAC or any other maintenance cost would be. We could try to get that for you.
Okay. The facilities are constructed anywhere between unknown and 1984. Looks like the newest building, maybe Unit 30.
Right.
All those buildings being greater than 40 years old. In your experience, does the cost of maintenance go up as facilities get older?
Generally speaking, older facilities are going to cost more money to maintain until you get to the point where you decide not to keep them anymore, and you either rebuild them or relocate the program somewhere else.
You have somebody with you that may want to add to that. I'm not sure. I was just didn't want to interrupt him.
We'll try to get you some numbers on maintenance.
Okay. Then, since we called them operating units at Parchman, the Mississippi State Penitentiary, what about the non-operating units? Do you have any information on non-operating units? Are there units on the ground at Parchman?
I only got it. We only had information from the Department of Finance and Administration on the units that are housing people right at the moment. I've heard that there's some units up there that aren't operating.
Well, I would submit to you, there's some major units up there that are not operating, including Unit 32
Right.
that was built and apparently was a design flaw fiasco about 40 years ago. But are there maintenance costs attached to the non-operating units?
Well,
I'm going to ask you to stay behind that mic just because somebody's going to listen to this later and they're not going to hear you. They're just going to hear me,
Right.
and they'll be dumber for just
Right.
hearing me.
Right. I do not have any numbers on that. I would think that if you have a facility on your grounds, you probably are doing some minimal level of work on it just to keep it from falling into complete ruin. But once again, I do not have any information on upkeep costs for abandoned units.
But if there was any cost to keep a non-operating unit non-operating, that would add to the total operational budget of the prison.
It would, so long as you had the building in place if you didn't demolish it.
Now, I think Pier is tasked through statute to do an average inmate cost, daily average inmate cost every 2 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And currently, is that number $59.24?
That's still the number.
Okay. Now.
He said yes.
Okay. And I was fooled by that title for 2 or 3 years because when you say daily inmate cost to house an inmate in Mississippi, I'm just foolish enough to think of the 19,000 people, that's what it cost each one, but that's not actually accurate. The statute tasks Pier, if you correct me if I'm wrong on this, to give us the estimate of what it would cost if we operated the Holly Springs facility, which houses 1,000 people and is relatively newly built at ACA standards. Is that proper?
The current statute on cost per day requires us to determine how much it would cost to maintain and operate a facility with sufficient security and other services to secure the prisoners. There was a time when we were required to take an actual unit as a standard of comparison and use it as the benchmark for a private contractor. And as time went by, there were no true comparables left. There was once a 1,000-bed facility at South Mississippi, but they were putting far more than 1,000 people in it, which meant obviously the cost per day for that would have been lower. So because if they were holding 1,500 people rather than 1,000. So the legislature changed the law some years ago. So now what we do is kind of try to create what amounts to a hypothetical unit. And this is used for setting a benchmark for private prison contracts only. It is not, intended for anything else.
And I appreciate you're following what the statute says. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
But it would be more accurately titled the hypothetical daily inmate cost in the state of Mississippi.
It probably would be.
Yes, so that we can then contract out privately at a percentage less than the state cost. Sorry, it's a long title, but that's more accurate.
Yeah.
Do you believe the cost at Parchman is greater than this hypothetical cost per day per inmate?
I do not know.
Okay. I think that's ultimately, to a great degree, what I'm trying to figure out is that with the aged facilities there, with the remote issues as far as being able to hire staffing, that if we make a determination to move to Tutwiler or do something different, for the taxpayers' purposes, if it's a savings and if it's a more in line with how we need to be operating, that's what I think we're looking for. And I know Pierre can follow up. I'm asking you a lot of information that I didn't know to ask you beforehand. But you mentioned one thing, and I want to make sure that I understood that correctly. Talking about staffing, did I understand you to say that currently we're at 30-something% staffed at Parchman for correctional officers?
We were doing a little follow-up on the DOJ report from last year or 2 years ago. And if you reviewed that report, you remember that the vacancy rates were very, very high for all positions, and for security positions, vacancy rates were running somewhere around 45 to 53%, depending on the period when DOJ looked at them. We decided to follow up and see if there were any improvements. And as of a couple of weeks ago, we determined that the vacancy rates have fallen somewhat. They're down to 33% for correctional and security, 43.2%. That's still a high vacancy rate. It has improved somewhat. Now, the question for us and anyone else making decisions about this is whether or not they can maintain this in view of the fact that you have a shrinking population in the Delta. You have a large percentage of the population that is probably older than what you would be hiring for COs, younger than what you would be hiring for COs, and lesser educational attainment up there. So you don't have a huge pool of people to choose from. So it's commendable that they've managed to get up to 33%. I don't know how long they can maintain it.
Do you know how that vacancy percentage compares to the facilities, CMCF and the facility in Leakesville?
I saw something at one point in time, I don't have it in front of me, that CMCF was somewhere around 19% for COs. And I believe South Mississippi is running somewhere in the low 30s also. So they have a pretty high vacancy rate also.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barrett.
One other question, Mr. Booth. I can appreciate Pierre's recommendation, but I do have a question. How can Tutwiler in Tallahatchie County have the labor force and it's 15 miles away and
Mhm.
I mean, is there that much of a difference in those 15 miles in population?
Once again, our research was focused entirely on DOC and Parchman. I would, think that there might very well be a challenge in filling positions up there. Once again, I don't have their vacancy rates, so I can't tell you anything about how successful they are at maintaining personnel in Tutwiler and whether they're more successful than Parchman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the comparison of the salary for the officers in Tutwiler and in Parchman? What would be the comparison?
To be honest with you, Senator, I haven't compared what the salaries difference would necessary to be between Tutwiler and the facility.
Is that something that we can look into?
Yes.
Because you all know that we're aware that Parchman is understaffed due to various reasons, the pay, the environment, and so forth. So I guess what are the plan of action that's been put in place, if any, to recruit more officers?
The plan of action would be if we were able to purchase the Tutwiler facility, then use the combination of both facilities for employment purposes so that we don't have those vacancies.
I guess my question is, if Parchman is understaffed, how would you be able to recruit workers to work at the Tutwiler facility?
Those people who are currently, it won't take as many people to maintain those people that will be left at the Parchman facility. Then the rest of those people will be able to go and work at the Tutwiler facility.
So that's the question when I ask about the comparison of the salary. If the salary is much lower at Parchman, I mean, if the salary is much higher at Parchman than it is in for those individuals in Tutwiler, why would I transition to work at the Tutwiler facility?
Because if you are currently, if everything goes according to the plan, Senator, if you are currently working at Parchman and you are to work at the Tutwiler facility, then your pay doesn't change. Because it will be owned by the state of Mississippi, not by the individuals who currently own the Tutwiler facility. So your pay doesn't change.
You're saying that the pay doesn't change for those individuals that's been transitioned to work at the Tutwiler facility?
Correct.
Okay, what about those individuals that are working now at the Tutwiler facility?
Okay, then
Will
I'm
their pay
sure
remain the
that,
same or?
I'm sure that their pay would be the same as those people at Parchman if those people, their pay is more than it is at Tutwiler. So it'd be paid whatever the current wage is or the wage that's being offered by MDOC for their correctional officers.
Okay, well, will we be able to get data on the salary for both facilities?
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Hill.
I like to make a motion and lay the bill on the table.
It's been
Subject to call.
it's in motion that we lay the bill on the table subject to call, but before we take a vote on that bill, I was just asking the committee that 4 years ago, or maybe not 4 years ago, maybe of all of us who are sitting here today, at the height of everything that was going on at Parchman, not only did we go, but we expressed our concerns as well. Some holding signs, some participating in rallies, and other things that was happening in regards to closing Parchman. And now we have an opportunity. But I will get that information back to you all since the numbers and things are important. But just be mindful that in no way was I just trying to just abruptly close one place. I'm just trying to make sure that Mississippi does something good, and that is to phase out a facility that is outused is life, and we could better provide places for our incarcerated people to be at a lower tax, at a lower burden on our taxpayers. So motion has been made there. Senator?
Question about the motion, question.
Yes, sir, Senator Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The motion is laid on the table subject to call, which means that you can bring it back up at a later date. My question is, how long do you think it would take to get the information?
I will be
To
working
answer.
throughout the day and throughout the night and probably tomorrow to get this information back as soon as I possibly can to you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So it's been motion. All in favor? All opposed? All right. Show of hands. All in favor? All in favor to lay it on the table, then subject call to the chair by raising your hand. Got the number. All opposed? Four. County board. Just, if I may, I know that this is a pretty big deal, and I want to do exactly what's right. To my former vice chair, to some of the others here, I would like to have the opportunity to bring it back for those members who have those questions, so that we can, what I said earlier is what I really meant, and that is there should be an opportunity for, if a person gives you their word on something, then it should count for something. And we should always just rely on something in paper to say that it's a binding thing, but our word should mean something.
Would the chair like to make the motion to lay it on the table subject to call of the chair?
Of the chair, yeah. Okay. So the chair is asking that we lay this on the table subject to call by the chair. All in favor? All opposed? That's good. Motion. Thank you. I
There were
get
too many holes. What are the hard facts? I need to know. You heard the questions. I don't have to tell you.
Oh, I ain't mad. I mean, I knew it was coming.
Okay.